right, welcome to Exodus chapter 34. Thank you for joining us here in person, and thank you for watching online. If you're watching online, it's awesome. Unless you don't like this, then just fast forward to the end of this video, and you'll be done with it. All right, as a quick review, okay? By the way, you can always go to bradflack.com/Exodus, and on there is maps, artifacts, archaeology, geology, mountain terrain. What does it look like in the Red Sea where they crossed over? And there's artifacts where there's in the sand that melted underneath the pillar of fire. All sorts of cool stuff that had been uncovered, and I'm sharing that with all of you as we're going through the study of the book of Exodus. And so, as a quick review, remember the end of Genesis. Joseph, who was sold into slavery, they were going to, kill him, and then they know let's not kill him, so make some money off of him, let's sell him to slavery, and that whole story is the end of Genesis. And basically he rises to power where he's the second only underneath the Pharaoh. Everything else is underneath Joseph. He's in charge of everything except for Pharaoh himself, and he does a lot of great, amazing things. It's a great story. It's a great read. If you haven't read the end of Genesis, it's very worth your time. Go read End of Genesis. Huh? The Viceroy, that's right. Which actually is the transliteration that means the vice king. So he's the second command, right? So we then look at Exodus, and within the first chapter, it says, a new Pharaoh came to power who did not remember Joseph and his great things that he did for Egypt. And that's where we start seeing the people of the Hebrews, as we're calling them, at this time, their lives start spiraling very quickly downward, and they're enslaved. They're being told what to do, how to do it, et cetera, and it's really kind of almost out of spite and out of jealousy because they were in this posh land of Goshen in the northeast. They were up here in the northeast part of the Nile River Delta, and at that time we were in Upper Nile, which the Nile flows this direction. So Upper Nile is actually this direction. Lower Nile is down here in the Mediterranean. And so we actually see that the kings, Luxor and the other big places, they had big establishments being done down here further up the river. And part of that was because they were trying to take over Nubia, which is the upper part of Egypt. And right around this time, when Joseph was involved, he helped to unify the upper and lower parts of, which is backwards because we're headed from north and south. He unites the north and the south together, the Nubian and the Egyptian empires, because remember there was a great famine for 7 years, and so people are looking for food. People are looking for how are we going to make it through the next meal. And because of Joseph, and God had given him dreams to interpret of what Pharaoh's dreams were, then they were able to sell to everybody, and then they were able to make contracts and covenants with people where basically they were like, okay, well, you give me all your land and we'll feed you for the next year, and you give me all your cattle and we'll feed you bread for the next year. They were just making deals. I mean, Joseph made Egypt very powerful, and so the fact that now that same people group, which Joseph brought in 400 something years later, is now being put underneath the thumb of this office, which had brought them in there in the first place, is kind of a topsy-turvy way of saying that not everything lasts, right? Not everything lasts. When you're in a bad situation, it's not always going to last. God's in control. When you're in a good situation, not always going to last, okay? We live in a sinful world. I have a great example I give my kids. If I put an apple on the table and I leave it there for a week, what's going to happen to it? It decays, right? It decays. It falls apart and becomes fly food, worm food. It's just a gushy mess. And so our universe, everything decays and falls apart. So anything that's good is God acting in our world. Okay, so we are already through the Exodus. They left out of here, and I put on bradflack.com/Exodus all the way down in chapter 34. I put kind of a real quick down and dirty where they crossed, but they had some that were working down in this area to kind of construct the Luxor and the other stuff that was going on. And they had some here that were working in Cairo area, which is where the pyramids are. That kind of makes sense. But most of them were coming out of Goshen, which is this northeast corner. And the three parties kind of joined up, crossed over here, and then they went all the way across. There's another little body of water here called the Gulf of Aqaba, or the Sea of Aqaba. Okay, it's not on this cutout because it's really small. But they crossed across here, and then they went to right about there to the Sea of Aqaba, and they crossed over there to northwest. This is the Arabian Peninsula. They went to the Arabian Peninsula there, and that's where they crossed the Red Sea onto dry land. They were able to see the Pharaoh's army. The Egyptian army was overtaken and drowned. And so then they saw this amazing miracle. They saw all the plagues, the firstborn being the culmination, right? And they were saved through the Passover, the blood of the lamb on the door, right? And then they weren't just said, okay, fine, you can leave. The Egyptians said, get out of here, and here, take all of our stuff too, right? And so we see that, and then they get to the sea, where they're up against that body of water, and the Egyptian army's coming. Like, oh man, now I guess we're just gonna die. We're just gonna, like, did you not, like a day or two ago, we were just, come on, man, where's your faith? Where's your faith? And so God says, hold out your staff, and of course the sea parts, and they go across, and they get to the other side, and he lowers his rod, and the sea comes down, and it kills the Egyptian army, right? And then they walk another day or two, like, oh, we're so thirsty. You should have just left us in Egypt. At least we had food and drink, and we were slaves, but at least we had stuff in our tummy. And you can see Moses starting to rub his temples, like, oh man, what is happening right now with these people, right? And so we see this on and on, this pattern on and on, and they're making their way across here to the Mount Sinai, and we know Mount Sinai is there in the land of Midian, which is northwest Saudi Arabia, and we just finished up chapters 20 through 32. 20 through 32 is Moses went up on the mountain, and God gives him the commandments. Or I don't say that commandment's a bad word, but we saw in Exodus 19 how he presented and said, hey, I'm going to take you to be my people. That was one of the promises of the Exodus. I'm going to take you to be my people. It's number 4. And so this is like a wedding ceremony. He was like, hey, you come, you wash yourselves, wash your clothes, wipe your nose, Bradford. You're coming over here to the bottom of the mountain, and you're going to present yourselves before me, and I'm going to take you to be my people on this day. And then chapter 20 immediately rolls into what I say is the covenant, the vows. And God says, don't cheat on me. Don't have any other gods except for me. Don't use my name in vain. Don't just work all the time. Remember the Sabbath day. Like, save a day for me. Right? We see these are more like a marriage vows when we break it down. And then he says, not only that, but you guys are living amongst each other. These are the things of how you live together in harmony and peace with one another. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't kill. Don't murder somebody. All that kind of stuff. So we see God kind of outline, this is what I hope to see our community, our covenant, our relationship look like. I want to see that fulfilled in our lives. But what we really realize is, as Moses is up there getting these commandments from God, they take all the earrings, the gold earrings, melt them down, and make a golden calf to worship.
Hey, Brad, was this in 2 weeks? You think 2 weeks period he was up on the mountain?
40 days. Okay. So he's up there for 6.5, 7 weeks.
So they started getting worried.
They started getting worried. They started getting concerned. Yeah, he's up there 6 weeks. I mean, think about back when you were in school. Now it's a 9-week grading period, I think, at school. But back in the day, it was a 6 weeks, right?
Credit card.
Yeah, it's a whole report card cycle. I mean, think about how long that was as a kid. That might as well have been a year as far as we were concerned. But now, we see 6 weeks. We're like, oh man, 6 weeks. I don't know. I might get it done by then.
Well, their living arrangements probably made it even seem longer.
Yeah, they're living in huts and tents at the base of the mountain in the desert. And so their livelihood, as far as what they're doing, they're not producing a bunch of stuff. They're in the middle of the desert. They don't have resources. All they have is what they carried with them, right? So they kind of the idle hands thing. Like, well, Moses, he went up there, and it's really scary. The mountain's on fire with smoke and lightning, and the mountain is shaking. And so perhaps he got took. I mean, he's out. So instead of worshiping that God he was trying to introduce us to him, instead of worshiping that God, let's just make a golden calf and worship that. It's like, but that's not what we do. When I don't feel like God's working in my life, how often do I turn to playing on my phone or going outside and working on something in the garage? Or how often do I turn to, well, I need to put more hours in at the office, or I need to go and tinker in the car, I got to change the brake pads. I know I changed them like last week, but I got to change them again or whatever. Like when we get to the place where we have those idle hands, it's very easy for us to turn from God. And we really need to use that as an opportunity to turn to God, right? And that's kind of what that brings us as a review. That kind of brings us to where we are here in Exodus 34, all right? So if you will, pull out your Bible app or pull out your Bible. I am reading from the Modern English Version. That's the one that I particularly like. If you don't have a version of the Bible that you like, find one, okay? It doesn't matter to me. There's no wrong version of the Bible unless it omits the gospel message. That's the only version that's not good, okay? And so I like the Modern English Version. You choose one. You read the Bible enough that you have a version that you like, all right? So we're going to go to Exodus 34 today, and I'm going to read through here together, and then we're going to have some. I'm going to read through, and then we'll stop and have some conversation, and then we'll keep reading through again, and we'll have more conversation, etc. All right? And I had a pastor, a preacher, one time tell me that if I can't preach louder than the baby can cry, then I don't need to be preaching. All right? So you guys are good back there. Don't worry about that. He's a good baby anyway. Or not baby, good toddler. It's not the baby, it's a toddler. I blame him, actually. She's trying to reverse all these years of... yeah.
We're all praying for her, too.
No, glad you're here. All right, Exodus 34. Let's go together. Now the Lord said to Moses, cut for yourself 2 tablets of stone like the first, and I will write on these tablets the words that were on the first tablets, which you broke. So, right there, out of the chutes, what's happening? God is throwing some serious sarcasm at Moses here. He's like, by the way, I cut the first stones. I wrote on the first stones. And remember, you threw a hissy fit when you got to the bottom of the mountain? So check this out. Go cut for yourself 2 tablets of stone like the first ones. And I will write on these tablets the words that were on the first tablets, which you broke. Right? I think God's just throwing some real sarcasm. I love it, If you don't think God has a sense of humor, then you're not reading the Bible correctly, I really think God has got a sense of humor. Yeah, the ones that you broke. Be ready in the morning and come up in the morning to Mount Sinai and present yourself there to me on the top of the mountain. That's not new information. He just spent 40 days there. And he come down for a couple of days. He's about to go back, all right? Now, we also remember the 40 days that he was up there the first time, he didn't take any food or drink with him. Like, we like to go backpacking, and so we're putting, liters of water and food, and we got snacks, and like, oh, man, I'm getting hungry. Let's take a snack out of my little pocket and whatever. Like, he's like, God said, come up here and come talk with me. He didn't know how long it was going to be. They just, I'm going up the mountain. Next thing you know is 6-7 weeks passes by. I mean, good night, right? I mean, this is a serious deal. So he says, come on up the mountain. You can see Moses going, oh, again? Oh, man. Not really. I mean, I'm sure he's excited to be in God's presence. But God's also being a little bit sarcastic here, so maybe he's kind of reading like, this may be going to the woodshed a little bit, right?
Well, he's already dealt with Moses, remember, questioning things before.
Yeah,
Pharaoh.
right, yeah, with Pharaoh. No one is to come up with you. Do not let anyone be seen anywhere on the mountain, and the flocks or herds may not graze in front of the mountain. So God is being very explicit here. Nobody else, just you. Don't bring reinforcements. Don't bring. Remember your sidekick Aaron, your brother, who's supposed to be your mouthpiece. I don't want him up here. Don't bring Joshua up here. Joshua was kind of almost up there with him the last time, if you'll remember when we read. Don't bring anybody else up here. Just you. I can see Moses going, "Oh man, I'm getting it." He's gonna give it to me right here. So Moses cut out 2 tablets of stone like the first, and Moses rose up early in the morning, went up to Mount Sinai, just as the Lord had commanded him, and took in his hand the 2 tablets of stone. That doesn't mean that he didn't take anything else. That was the only things that he wrote that he took. But I'm going to also venture to guess that he kind of already knew the plan because he had already been up there for 40 days. All right. So I don't know what kind of pack, if he had any. Maybe he had a fanny pack on or something. I don't know. Okay. A Jansport. Yeah.
It's funny because you're like, God's like, go make 2 more tablets like the ones you broke. You know what I mean? He says, he made us in his image. And Adam was like, well, the woman you gave me.
That's right. That's right. Always pointing the fingers, right? Then the Lord descended in the cloud and stood with him there and proclaimed the name of the Lord. The Lord passed by before him. By the way, in my Bible, and maybe in yours, it's all capitals, Lord there. Does that what yours say?
No.
What does yours say, Gary?
No, yeah, that is capital.
It's all capitalized? 5 and 6?
It's not capital. 4, 5, and 6. Just the L. Just the L, yeah.
All right, so yeah, and four as well. So what that is that is where God is using his personal name. We know it to be likely Yahweh, although we don't know for certain because the Hebrew, they didn't include vowels. It was just YHWH. So we're left to guess it was Yahweh or Yahweh or Yahweh or Yahweh. I mean, we don't know. We're just saying Yahweh, okay? Now, that has been transliterated into Latin, German, all the other stuff, and that's where it comes out as Yehovah, right? Because it was just YHWH. And so you think about a German person or a Nordic person, a lot of times that W, like Volkswagen. And so it's the VW situation. So Yehovah, you can see how they translated it from YHWH to Yehovah, okay? So that's where that comes from. And so that when we see the Lord, capital L there, all caps, what does yours say if it doesn't say, because it says the Lord proclaimed the name of the Lord. The Lord descended in there and proclaimed the name of the Lord. What does it say in yours?
Well, it says the Lord descended into the cloud, stood with him there, and proclaimed the name of the Lord.
Okay.
One says he called out his own name, Yahweh.
Okay. What version are you reading?
NLT.
Okay, that's a great translation. Called out his own name, Yahweh. Okay, so there you go. This is why I like to go through a lot of different versions, right? It's just like we talked about before, and I'll say this real quick. Like when I first started talking with Mike, just because we said this is white doesn't mean it's bright white. It could be off-white, antique white, yellow white, whatever. We're not saying it's not white, but there are different whites, okay? So the different translations could say, your translation might say it's off-white, and his translation might just say white, and mine might say bright white.
Kind of like the synoptics.
The Synoptic Gospels, which we talked about. Huh?
Mine says egg white.
Egg white, there you go.
Mine's mother of pearl.
Mother of pearl. Mine says opal, so. I don't know, is opal white? No? It's multicolored. So that's even better because all colors make white.
Kind of swirly.
All right, we digress. So, the Lord, Yahweh, he's saying his own name. It would be like saying Brad. So, Brad, I'm going to use it here, not because I'm God, but just so you kind of get the hit. It says, just as Brad had commanded him and took in his hand the 2 tablets of stone. Then Brad descended to the cloud, stood with him there, and proclaimed the name of Brad. Isn't that, why is he doing that? What's he trying to prove here? It's like, it's me, it's Brad. It's not just me, but I'm also saying my name, Brad. Why is he doing that? What do you think, Bradford?
To make a point. To make sure they don't forget, I guess.
He's
physical form.
He's making a point. What did Moses just come from?
All these people that weren't listening.
All the people that weren't listening, and the golden calf. And so I think that what he's saying is, I know you're frustrated with them, and you just killed 3,000 of them as a result of doing this golden calf, all right, or whatever. I know this is a whole situation. Don't focus on that. Focus on me. I'm here physically, and I'm here with you. I'm talking with you. Open up your ears, open up your eyes, listen to what I'm saying. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Moses prays for like, I get it. They don't get it. I get it. I get it.
But we know that Moses, as we've been reading through Exodus, we see Moses almost because Moses wrote this, and we almost see him kind of being like, and Moses was frustrated with them yet again in the desert. Like we see him kind of voicing his frustration with how straying and probably annoying the Israelites were on the journey. And so God is almost saying, listen, you're not doing this for them. It's me. You're doing this for me and with me, right? I'm the one that called you in that burning bush to begin with. It wasn't you. I called you through that burning bush. And then I set you in motion to go do the things. Don't try to take this on yourself. That's not the point. All right? So let's go to verse 6. The Lord passed by before him and proclaimed, the Lord, Yahweh, right? The Lord God, merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in goodness and truth. You see what he's saying here? Moses just came from being really ticked off down at the bottom of the mountain. And what's God saying to him? God's calming him down. God's calming him down. Do you read that? God's calming him down. He's saying, the Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in goodness and truth, keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, but who will no by means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children and on the children's children to the third and fourth generation. And so then I think because of God presenting himself and trying to calm Moses down and remind him what it's about, look at verse 8. Moses made haste and bowed to the ground and worshipped. I think he showed up there ready to kind of like, all right, God, let's do this thing. I mean, I'm trying to do this. And those people down there, your people, and remember he said that. Moses was like, your people. And then I think God's just like, no, I'm going to diffuse this. It ain't about you. It's about me and my love and my mercy and my forgiveness. And a lot of people, when they read the Old Testament, I think they skip over or they don't recall little passages like this. Here we have an angry God who is talking about having grace and mercy and forgiveness and love and compassion on thousands. And there's some people who think, oh, well, that's just what Jesus did. But I see the same God right here. The second book of the Bible.
What do you say about the laying of the sins of the parents upon their children and grandchildren?
Is that a curse from God or is that a revelation by God? I think it's more of a revelation by God that sin will be visited by those. What my children see me do is what I saw my dad do and what he saw his dad do. So when my grandpa was dealing with stress and he was drinking a lot of beer, well, my dad, he started getting stressed. He's drinking a lot of beer, and while I'm growing up, I just see him, dealing with hard stuff in his life. And I see him drink. That sin is visited upon the generation. I don't believe that God was saying, I'm going to punish and curse them, because what did he just say right before that? He just said, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin by those. I'm not going to clear the guilty. Like there's still an atonement that has to be made, but visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children. And instead of visiting, what does yours say?
I lay the sins of the parents upon their children and grandchildren.
Yeah. So he's saying that sin is their responsibility. Mm-hmm. God is not possible
that sin
for sin.
Affects their children.
That's
basically.
right. Yeah.
God finds also the entire family is affected, even children in the third and fourth generation.
There you go. Yeah, that's a great translation for this passage. Okay. So Moses' response is to just, you know what? You're right, God. I'm going to worship. I'm sorry. I really had it in my head. I had it backwards. I had it wrong. Okay. And so he said, if now I have found favor in your sight, O Lord, let my Lord, I pray, go among us, for we are a stiff-necked people. Pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take us for your inheritance. Well, he said that before. He said that before when they were arguing and complaining to Moses. And he was like, oh, well, they're just a stiff-necked people. But now he's lumped himself in as a stiff-necked person in this prayer. And stiff-necked is basically, if you remember on the Exodus, you can see a picture of a yoke of oxen, cows, and they put the yoke on both of them. And if two of them are walking side by side, if they need to turn, if this one doesn't want to turn, then you're at a standstill. They both have to work together. And so a stiff-necked people is like God saying, okay, I'm now with you. I'm taking you to be mine. Let's go together. But the stiff-necked people are stiffing their neck, and they're not going to. So they're fighting. And so Moses is basically, it's a colloquial, an idiom or whatever. And so Moses is now lumping himself in with the people. And he says, we are a stiff-necked people. We are stiff-necked people. Pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take us for your inheritance. And that inheritance also has to do with the fourth promise, which says, take me to be your people. Because you're not going to get an inheritance, right? I'm not going to inherit Chris's, his major wealth and property ownership that he has across multiple continents. I'm not going to inherit that. I'm not related to him, right? But if Chris said, yeah, I'm going to adopt you, and you're going to be my new brother or my new son or whatever, then I would be in line for that. Does that make sense? You're not going to just give it to some random person unless they're in a plot of a movie, right? That's the only time you'll see that happen. And that always works out great for everybody in the movie, right? All right, let's go to verse 10. We kind of see that this is God and Moses trying to get back together, and God saying, it ain't about you. It ain't about what they did. I'm bigger than their mistakes. And Moses going, you're absolutely right. I'm so sorry. Yeah, can we get back together on this thing? And here we see in verse 10, then he said, indeed, I'm going to make a covenant before all your people. I will do wonders such as have not been done in all the earth nor in any nation. And all the people among whom you live will see the work of the Lord, for it is a fearful thing that I will do with you. Obey what I command you this day. Indeed, I am going to drive out before you the Amorite, the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite. Watch yourself so that you make no covenant with the inhabitants of the land where you're going, lest it become a snare in your midst. All right, hold on. So he's talking about, remember, Genesis chapter 12, God makes a covenant with Abram. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, Abram, some random dude, and says, Abram, guess what? I'm going to create a new storyline right here. It starts with you. You did nothing to earn this. I'm going to have a covenant with you, though. Okay, so that's starting with Abraham. And he says, from here to here to here to here, the little land of Israel, more or less as we know it today, I'm going to make this your land. It's going to be for your people. Abraham didn't see it. His son Isaac didn't see it. His son Jacob didn't see it. Here we are hundreds of years later. They're not living there. But what do we see God saying here? He's remembering the covenant. He's remembering what he told Abraham back in Genesis chapter 12. And here we are, 38, 70 something chapters later, and God is still talking about this covenant. God hasn't forgotten. Who's forgotten? The people. God's still working on it. Now, his timing is not our timing. Because when I want it to happen, I want it to happen now. Right? J.G. Wentworth, I want cash now, right? Do what? Or tomorrow. I'd even be okay with tomorrow. It's late, it's whatever. Yeah, absolutely. And listen, the Amorite, Canaanite, Hittite, Perizzite, Hivite, and Jebusite, those are all city-states, tribes that had kind of a city, town, and they had it secure with walls and stuff. And that was like their own little governing little area. It'd be like Spring versus Tomball versus Magnolia versus the Woodlands versus Humble versus whatever, right? Everyone's kind of got their own. We're all Southeast Texas. That is all in Israel, but we got our own little city states. All in Houston, basically. And so he says, I'm going to drive them out from in front of you. Why would he say that? To prove his power. Prove his sovereignty. To prove that he is the one who was able to fulfill the covenant. I've got between 1 and 3 million Israelites at the bottom of a mountain out in the middle of the desert. They just came out of slavery less than 2 months beforehand. Are they able to go to war and clear out all the people who've been living in here for hundreds of years? No. They can't even keep their mouths shut for a day, apparently. They're not ready to align together and fight as a unified force. They're not able to do that. So God says, guess what? You don't have to. I'm going to do it for you. I'm going to prepare the way so that all you have to do is show up. You just got to show up. That's it. So he says, watch for yourself so that you make no covenant with the inhabitants of the land where you're going, lest it become a snare in your midst. Let's see what 13 says. But you shall destroy their altars, break down their sacred pillars, and cut down their Asherah poles, for you shall not worship any other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. All right. There are Asherah poles, and they would go to the top of hills. I'll kind of draw you a picture here. I like to draw, and I haven't drawn in a while. So I'll draw a picture for you. The Jebusites, Hivites, all the people he just named, they'd go to the top of a hill like this, and there'd be, farmland or whatever down here. And at the top, they'd put a little hut, a little temple, as it were, to Asherah. And they would put these poles into the ground like this. And what that was supposed to signify is this is a high and holy place for you to come and worship the Asherah. Okay? It's effectively, work with me here, proto-Israeli Canaanite totem poles. And they'd put them out. And so when you walked by that building and it had the pole out front, you're like, that's an Asherah. Like, this is what they're worshiping here.
She was the god of fertility.
Correct.
And at this time, they looked at her as he was the god of gods.
Correct. And she was partnered with Baal. She was partnered with Baal, and he was the bull-looking god.
That's where they killed the babies, right?
And they killed the gods. They killed the babies before the gods of Baal. Yeah. And so Baal was the male, and Asherah was the female, and they were the king and queen gods.
Those totem poles are mentioned again in Deuteronomy.
Mm-hmm. So you tracking with me now? So he says, to destroy their altars, because what are they worshiping and what are they doing on these altars? You just mentioned it. They're killing babies. They're saying, we're going to sacrifice our babies so that we can have a good crop, so we can have good economic return. What does that sound like? Sounds a lot like modern day abortion to me, where it says, I don't want the financial responsibility of paying for this baby, so I'm going to go terminate its life. I want to have financial security over bringing up this life. That's what they did. So he says, go destroy their altars. God is calling them out. Break their sacred pillars. And cut down their Asherah poles. For you shall not worship any other god, for the Lord whose name is jealous is a jealous God. Lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and they prostitute themselves with their gods, and sacrifice to their gods, and someone invites you to eat of his sacrifice. And then you take of their daughters for your sons, and your daughters prostitute themselves after their gods. They will make your sons prostitute themselves after their gods. That's a pretty big leap from, you're going to move into this land, and there's some people there, wipe them out, get rid of everything that was there before, to, if you don't do it, it's not going to be like, okay, well, they're kind of annoying, they're there. If you don't do it, then your children will utterly become part of that culture and will utterly fail in my covenant. Did you just read that? I just read that.
I'm still stuck on the jealous God.
What was the number one commandment?
No other gods.
Have no other gods before me. Let me ask you a question. You guys have been married for what? 6-7 months? Okay. When you're in your vows, I'm sure somewhere in there you said, hey, yeah, whenever you feel like it, go ahead and find another guy, and it's cool, we can share, and it's no big problem. No, you said, no, you are the only one for me, and I'm the only one for you, and that's it. Would you call that maybe jealous? You're jealous for him?
It's a God who is jealous about his relationship with you.
That's right.
That's exactly what you just said.
Yeah. I'm not going to share it. I'm not sharing her with anybody.
I just see jealousy as a really negative thing.
But in the original text,
Because humans do it in a really negative way.
That's right. Yeah. This is a righteous jealousy. You ever heard of righteous anger? A righteous anger is that what Jesus, when he turned over those money changers and all that stuff in the temple, that's a righteous anger. He has a good reason, a godly reason, a holy reason for being upset. This is what he's talking about is a holy jealousy.
It's just like humans usually sin when we get angry,
Correct.
and we usually sin when we're jealous, but
Mhm.
God can do both perfectly, right?
Correct. And I ain't God.
No.
So he's saying, don't leave anything left over. When you go in here, you better clean house. Because if you don't do it, your children, your sons and your daughters, it's not going to go well. Okay, verse 17. You shall make no molded gods for yourselves. What does this sound awfully a lot like? Second commandment, right? Don't make any graven images. Don't make any idols. I mean, here we see God, he's like repeating himself because he got it right the first time.
And they just did it.
And they just did it down the mountain. And you can see Moses going, oh, okay, I hear you, man. I wasn't even down there.
Like I said, I get it.
I get it. I wasn't even down there, man. And then he goes into this. He says, you shall keep the feast of unleavened bread. For 7 days you're to eat unleavened bread, as I commanded you in the month of Aviv. For in the month of Aviv you came out of Egypt. So before we go into 19 here. So he's saying, he already told them this. So why is he saying these same things over and over again? Because Moses broke them the first time. So now he's like, I'm going to give you the abridged version. I'm not going to use as many words this time. In case you decide to get cranky on me again, Moses, I'm going to give you the down and dirty. Here's what the basic premise is. But it's the commandments again, all right? And so here in verse 19, we're going to see talking about dedication of the firstborn as a result of the 10th plague. Remember the 10th plague was the firstborn, right? So it says, every firstborn of the womb belongs to me. And every firstborn male among your livestock, whether ox or sheep. But you must redeem with a lamb the firstborn of a donkey. So what he's saying is, if you have a lamb, a sheep, or an ox, the first one who opens the womb, comes out, is born, that one belongs to me, and you shall sacrifice it to me. And he said, if you have a donkey that has a firstborn, I can't do nothing with a donkey. You need to bring a lamb instead on that one. Right? So, they're too stubborn. I can't do anything with the donkey. He's like, and so if you fail to redeem him, you must break his neck. And you must redeem all the firstborn of your sons. So he's saying, if you can get a lamb to take the place of the donkey, I'll let the donkey be a donkey. But if you can't, then you have to break its neck and sacrifice it to me. All right?
Wouldn't that also have been a way for them to use the donkey because the donkey would help them with
Correct. It would help them physically and monetarily and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, production. Yeah. And
Worth more than a lamb or a goat, probably.
I don't know monetarily worth more.
I don't know worth more as far as that goes, but
As far as help.
I could put more pack stuff on a donkey than I can a lamb. I mean, we went to Old McDonald's farm last week for my preschoolers field day, and the sheep were big. I mean, they're this tall, but I'm not riding a sheep. I could ride a donkey,
Back in this time,
Mutton busting.
Yeah. Yeehaw! What were you saying?
Pretty big donkey.
monetary was back at this time, a camel was the same price as a sword.
Oh wow.
So they give you an idea.
A sword?
A sword was cost the same as a camel.
Carry a lot of stuff with a camel over a lot of distance, right? All right. No one may appear before me empty-handed. We're going to come back to this in just a minute. You shall work 6 days, but on the seventh day you must rest. What does this sound like again? Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. I mean, he's saying the commandments again here. Even at the time of plowing and harvest, you must rest. I know that you're trying to go out there and get the wheat out of the field or whatever it is you're harvesting, but you're going to work 6 days. That seventh day, you're going to take a break. Like, well, I got to get the harvest in. Sorry. Take a break. Okay? You must observe the Feast of Weeks. And we talked a little bit about this. Let me draw this over here again. Again, my artwork is amazing. No, it is not for sale. So we have here, it's just a generic timeline, right? So here we have, I'll just call it day 0.
I mean, already, look at that artistry.
That's like Van Gogh.
I mean, and you know what? I could even go abstract. Jackson Pollock, baby. Look at that. All right. So
Pablo Picasso.
Yeah. A little cubism? Okay, look, here we go. Boom. I got a little cubism in there. All right. Whatever.
Yeah.
All right. So, my point is, day 0 begins the Feast of Unleavened Bread, okay? So, we've got 7 days of unleavened bread. So, I'll put unleavened bread, ULB, unleavened bread. And that means no yeast in your household or anywhere, anytime. You can't eat anything yeast for 7 days, right? Then, from this day here, we have day 50, which is the Feast of Weeks. Okay, Feast of Weeks. We know it from Acts chapter 2 as Acts chapter 2.
Passover. I mean Pentecost.
Aha! Pentecost. Yeah.
I was about to say the Feast of Unleavened Bread.
Yeah, the Feast of Unleavened Bread is here.
Mine says Festival of Harvest.
Yeah, and it's the same. It's Feast of Weeks, Festival of Harvest. So you could say Festival of Harvest.
Say it's called Shavuot.
Oh no, you're talking about that's later. Yeah. So Feast of Harvest is up here. That's what we're getting to. So here we've got 50 days to Feast of Weeks, and then we have the Feast of the Harvest out here. First fruits is right here. Feast of First Fruits. Good. I was waiting for someone to mention that. So you're actually planting your crops here. Okay? Probably a month or so before this time. We just had Passover and Easter. Was it wintertime? It's springtime? But like you're growing your peppers and stuff. How you got some plants, but you maybe got 1 or 2 little pop-ups. I mean, not so you don't have enough to even really harvest right now. Okay, so my whole point of saying that is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. At the end of that, you have the Feast of First Fruits, which is the Sunday, which is when Jesus rose from the dead, right? So the Feast of First Fruits, and the First Fruits would be, I'm going to go out into my field, my garden, my whatever, and whatever I've got, I got 5 grapes. Okay, well, I'm plucking them off, and I'm gonna sacrifice them, give them to God. Or I've got a field of barley. Well, I've got half a pound out of this whole field. Okay, it's your tithe. That's what you're saying. This is what I'm giving to you, God. It's all I got. And I'm, in faith, going to have you provide for me out of this. And so that's where we are on the Feast of Weeks. The Feast of Weeks is 50 days later, which is probably close to about the 80, 90-day range here. So that way, this is what we call the barley harvest, or the Feast of Weeks. And that's because barley ripens faster than wheat does. And so you have the barley harvest, and you would literally say, this is the first harvest of the season. That is the full harvest. We can make money off of it. We can make bread from this. They had special grain that was grown down in Bethlehem, and they would make the bread for the temple. Remember we talked about that before. They make the bread. So that's going over here. So this first harvest that happens after the Passover, I guess I need to put Passover here. The Passover would be right in here.
You know, the day of Pentecost being 50, you can kind of see how everything coincides now.
Right. So my first harvest, the first harvest in the Holy Spirit, bringing thousands into the body of believers, was at Pentecost, and that was the first harvest. Right? And then we have the Feast of Harvest over here, and this is where the wheat is done. And if I'm not mistaken, it's another 50 days past that. I'm not 100% sure on the day there, but it's about 100 days. Okay? And so we see here the Feast of Wheat, and this is where the rest of everything else is going to be harvested, and you start collecting for the fall. You know, you get your gourds and your apples and your pomegranates and all the other. This is where everything else gets harvested. Okay? Now, spiritually speaking, we've had the creation here. My handwriting is very Pollock today. We have creation today. Here we have effectively unleavened, a time of unleavened bread. I'm going to say that's JC in town. Then we have the Passover. That's the cross. Then we have the Feast of the First Fruits. That's the empty tomb. I'm going to say Pentecost is the arrival of the Holy Spirit and the first harvest. The next harvest that's coming is going to be when everything else is harvested. And I think that's when Jesus' second coming. In a spiritual level, okay? I can't tell you when that is.
Oh, I thought that's what we're here.
Get out. Just kidding. So, God is telling them, observe the Feast of Weeks, which is this one, the first fruits of the wheat harvest, and the Feast of Ingathering at the end. The ingathering is, right here past the wheat, right? So 3 times in the year, all your males must appear before the Lord God, the God of Israel. For I will drive out the nations before you. Remember, he's going to drive out all those other nations here before you, and enlarge your borders. No man will cover your land when you go up to appear before the Lord your God 3 times in a year. But he's saying right there, he's saying, you're going to go up for the Feast of Unleavened Bread. You're going to go up for the Feast of Weeks. You're going to go up for the Feast of Harvest into the temple, which is Shavuot, okay? And when you do that, no one's going to come in there and steal your land or steal your crops or whatever. I'll make sure that I will protect your backside, okay? He's literally saying that right here, verse 24. So let's go to 25. You must not offer the blood of my sacrifice with leaven. So don't have that lamb that you're going to sacrifice, or the goat or the ox or the sheep or whatever it is, and then try to eat leavened bread with it. Don't do it. Make sure it's the little crackers, okay? Nor is the sacrifice of the feast of the Passover to be left until the following morning. You have to eat everything. Question: how big is a lamb?
1 pound.
Yeah, about how big is a lamb?
50 to 40, 50 pounds.
Yeah, probably 40 to 80 pounds, somewhere in that. Yeah, 40 to 80 pounds. Okay? I mean, that's like a 3rd grader. Okay? With lots of fur. A 3rd grader with lots of fur. Okay?
That needs a bath.
That needs a bath. My question to you: 40 to 80 pounds. Field dressed, it's probably 25 to 35 pounds, 40 pounds maybe. Okay? When's the last time you sat down and had 25 pounds of meat? Never. When's the last time my family sat down and had 25 pounds of meat? I have 5 in my family. I mean, it's last night, but still, it doesn't matter. I got growing boys. No, never. Never have we sat down and had 25 pounds of meat. I mean, I make spaghetti, a huge bowl of spaghetti, and I put like 3 pounds of meat in there, and we've got leftovers.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So 25 pounds of meat. That's a lot of... So he says here in verse 25, he says, nor is the sacrifice of the feast of Passover to be left until the following morning. So my family will sacrifice a lamb for Passover. We'll have our 2, 3, 4 pounds if we gorge ourselves. Maybe 5 if we waited all week to not eat anything. What are we going to do with 20 more pounds of meat? God was setting up something here in this very pronouncement in verse 25 here. He's saying, you are not supposed to celebrate me and my great and mighty deeds, that third promise of the Exodus, by yourselves. Invite others in. Don't be myopic, short-sighted, put your blinders on about your faith with me. I want you to invite others in. I want you to participate with others. I want you to to continue to lift up other people, okay, and invite them to the table. All right. Battery might be dying. I don't know. It's plugged in. It's charging. So if you stop seeing my face, that means the battery died. The first of the first fruits of your land you must bring to the house of the Lord your God. Why? Brandy already told us the tithe, right? And then here's an odd one. You must not boil a young goat in its mother's milk. So you can't do any French-style cooking. Verse 26. No French-style cooking. Don't make goat butter and then cook a baby goat in the goat butter.
That sounds really weird. I mean, I would need a handbook probably back then.
Well, what's the purpose? We've talked about this before. What's the purpose of all these laws? What are we supposed to get out of this?
I think to bring organization to a bunch of unorganized
That's true.
people that aren't unified. How can you fight another nation? I mean, like you were talking about earlier, if you're not unified, if there's no organization.
Constantly keep the Lord in your thoughts.
And are they going to do it perfectly every time? No, they can't do it perfectly every time. And so the law simply tells us we can't do it. We can't fulfill it of our own. And Jesus, when he came, he did. He fulfilled every single law. We couldn't do it. So he did it for us. He who was without sin became sin, right? He who was without sin became sin. Verse 27. The Lord said to Moses, write down these words, for in accordance with these words, I have made a covenant with you, with Israel. Now, hold on a second here. I want you to pay attention here. Go back to verse 1. What did God say to Moses in verse 1? Cut out the stone like the first, and what? I will write on the tablets. Now, we'll go over here to verse 27. The Lord said to Moses, what did he say to him? Yeah, write down this. So who's writing? Who's writing here? I think, personally, and I could definitely be wrong. I could totally be wrong, and I'm okay with that. I think that God, remember we talked about cuneiform a couple weeks back? That I think that God was dictating and Moses was writing the stuff down. Like, not only are you going to come up here prepared to write, but you're going to write everything again because you threw the hissy fit and broke that stuff. So you're going to come up here prepared to take notes. And I think maybe that's why the notes are different than it was the first time. That's just me. I could totally be wrong. Does it change? Does it change anything about the story itself? No. But for me, I find that's intriguing. Okay, I find it interesting. And you guys know me well enough by now that I find kind of crazy stuff like that when I'm reading the Bible. I'm just weird. All right, I'm okay with weird.
We know.
Well, I learned it from you, okay? Then the Lord said to Moses, write down these words, for in accordance with these words, I have made a covenant with you and with Israel. So he was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights, and he did not eat bread or drink water, and he wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the 10 Commandments. So I'm saying that the second time around, Moses had to write it down. And the easiest way that he would have been able to do that was something like cuneiform. Right? It's plausible. I mean, if he handwrote it, he could have wrote it out. Yeah. So, yeah. Let me show you real quick. I happen to be an expert at cuneiform. Not really, just kidding. There's a stick, and so you'd have a clay tablet like something like this, and then you'd have a stick. I'm gonna tell you again. You had a stick that had a kind of a shape like that, and so you could turn it. You could turn it different directions. And so that may be A, I don't know. And then this might be B. And then you could even do another, this symbol might be C. I don't know, whatever it is. And so you could do all sorts of combinations of turning different things and 2, 3, 4, or whatever, different directions. And that gives you, if I'm not mistaken, it gives you like syllables that you can then kind of pronounce. I don't do cuneiform. I barely do English. All right, so.
I think you just casted a spell.
Yeah.
Uh-oh, I better get rid of that. Uh-oh, my bad.
You gotta be careful.
Whew.
These ancient Egyptian stuff gets.
We got Harry Potter up in here. Ridiculous. All right. So he's there. All right, so he's up there for 40 more days. So he's up there. I keep saying 6 to 7 weeks. It's really 5.5. Let's see. 5 weeks is 35. So I guess it's 6 weeks. 6 weeks is 42. So really about 6 weeks. He's up there for another 6 weeks. And verse 29. When Moses came down from Mount Sinai. So he's coming back down the mountain. Here we go. Let's see what the people end up to down there. Last time he came down, there was a golden calf. Let's see what they're up to. With the 2 tablets of testimony in the hands of Moses, he came down from the mountain. Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone while he talked with him. So when Aaron and all the children of Israel saw Moses, amazingly the skin of his face shone, and they were afraid to come near him. But Moses called to them, and Aaron and all the rulers of the congregation returned to him, and Moses spoke to them. Afterward, all the children of Israel drew near, and he commanded them all that the Lord had spoken to him on Mount Sinai. And when Moses finished speaking with them, he put a veil over his face. But whenever Moses went in before the Lord to speak with him, he took the veil off until he came out. Then he came out and spoke to the children of Israel what he had been commanded. And the children of Israel saw the face of Moses, that the skin of Moses' face shone, and then Moses put the veil over his face again until he went in to speak with him. So here we have God, and where is he talking to God now? He's not on the mountain anymore, right? So where is he talking to God?
In the tent of meeting.
That's right, the tent of meeting, which is also called the tabernacle, right? That's a fun word to say. Everyone say tabernacle. Yeah. Close. I'll give you half credit. All right. So we have the tent of meeting. Our new friend, Mr. Gary, here, so eloquently pointed out. We have the tent of meeting. And by the way, we have north, right? And east is where the opening would be facing. And so the sun would be shining in through there. And you had the Holy of Holies separated with that veil back there. And then you had the Ark of the Covenant. And Moses would go in there to the tent of meeting and would talk with God. Apparently, spending 40 days and then coming down the mountain and throwing a hissy fit and spending another 40 days in God's presence, his glory kind of wears off onto you. Now, I don't normally sunburn very badly. My wife will sunburn quite badly. She will glow red. But I remember particularly my freshman year of college, we went and floated for like 10 or 12 hours down the Guadalupe River. I had no shirt. I had flip-flops and swim shorts, swim trunks. I had no water, no food. I mean, the other guys were drinking beer and stuff, which is probably even worse for them. I had nothing. I didn't have a hat. I didn't have sunglasses. I had nothing. And had no sense. And I remember getting back to my dorm, and I was like just miserable. Just the sun was just radiating heat off of me. And, you know, I looked just about as red lobster as you could possibly get. It was miserable, terrible. I literally lay, you know, in the college dorms, they had like the plastic covered mattresses. It was more comfortable for me to lay on that plastic and feel the heat coming off of my body than it was for me to do anything else. It was miserable. I remember that. And I can only imagine that his face wasn't sunburnt in that respect, but the sun's interaction onto us causes our bodies to react. I can only imagine being in the presence of God's glory.
It's too bright to look at.
It's too bright to look at, and it affected him, right? It affected him physically in a real way. And as a matter of fact, the people were not necessarily put off by it, but the people were like, "Whoa, Moses, what you got going on, man? You okay?"
I think a radiation.
Yeah. He's got a radiation glow. And listen, I want to go back to all the way back to like Exodus chapter like 6 or 7, when God's first talking to Moses up on that burning bush. Do you remember? He was like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to go and rescue the people of the Hebrew people out of the bondage of the Egyptians." Is that what Moses responded to God? What did he say?
Can't talk.
He said, "I can't talk. I'm not special. I murdered a guy over there. I'm a shepherd. I mean, I'm nobody." Moses is kind of like the unlikely hero, right? And so when you see Moses and they're talking like, "Oh, Moses, man, your face, man, are you okay? Like, you're glowing, right?" And Moses puts on a veil over his face because he's not that guy. It's not that he's self-conscious. He just doesn't want to make other people feel uncomfortable. And I think that's interesting because I'll be honest, if it was me, I'd be like, "Da-da, look at me, nice and bright, here we go," you know. I'd be like, "Boom, look, ha," you know. But that's just me. That's my personality. That's my sin nature, all that kind of stuff, right? So I think there's something to be said where he was like, nah, I don't want it to be an issue. I'm just going to cover my face up. I think, though, that has two kind of meanings. One is I don't want to disrupt other people, but when he does that, what's he also doing inadvertently?
Being like God, where you can't look at him.
No,
Humbling himself.
he's humbling himself, but he's also
Taken away from the shine.
I'm not really shining God's glory. Like I'm not really like I'm gonna cover it up a little bit. That's too bright. It's too garish.
They would think like, oh, he's a god or something, you know.
Or given their past history, that's probably not outside the realm of possibilities.
I don't want them to get confused.
Yeah.
So let me put a veil over, not to confuse
I
them.
love him more than the gold.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right. So Mike was baptized yesterday,
Yeah.
and
Hallelujah.
and he came out of that water and he was glowing, right?
He looked younger.
He looked younger. He looked amazing, right? So my whole point is he spent some time in the presence of God, being obedient to believers' baptism, and he came out of the water radiant. That was a couple of minutes. If you spent 40 days in the very presence of God, think about how your just very presence would radiate the glory of God.
Like Louis the Lightning Bug.
Like Louis the Lightning Bug. He said radiation. He's like,
Hold him under so long.
yeah.
If Mike spent 40 days in the water, he'd be wrinkled like a prune.
Yeah, he would. He'd be floating for other reasons. So my whole point is we need to take a page from the Bible and remember that the more time we spend in God's presence, the more time we spend learning from his word, praying, worshiping him, counseling with others, being counseled by those that are further along than ourselves, we begin to have a goal. Like, I don't know, like Bradford, there's something about you, man. I don't know, like you were doing drugs, you were doing this, that, and the other. Something's changed, man. What's different about you? That's what we should be radiating in our lives. It should be something where it's something that is intrinsically attractive to other people because of God's glory. The thing to remember is the sun and the moon. The sun radiates its own creative fusion, right? And fission.
Photosynthesis.
No. Photons from fission and fusion. The moon makes nothing. The moon simply reflects the sun's light. So we are to be like the moon and reflect the glory of God to those around us. All right? All right. Comments, questions, complaints?
That was easy to say. When I came to your house, you give me the secret word.
He always wants me to give him a cliff notes before we come to Bible study.
Her too.
So Exodus 34, I think we need to remember that we go in thinking, oh man, I really messed up. I really, really messed up. Or someone in my family really messed up, and that may make me have an issue with God, because I'm supposed to be responsible for my family or whatever. And what was the first thing that God told Moses in 34? Besides, remember, you're the one that broke the tablets. But after that, what did he say? He said, dude, chill out.
Yeah, I would have been afraid to go up there.
Yeah.
With Moses because
Yeah.
everybody failed. Like he's up there doing all the.
It's like, man,
Just broke these tablets.
Yeah. And so God goes, no, hold on. I'm here to extend grace and love and mercy and forgiveness. Just take a break, man. Get outside of your head. I'm obviously not super happy that happened, and there's consequences. He literally says that there's consequences for that. But this is not about you and what you're doing. This is about me and what I'm doing. So let's get back to it, okay? So when you're going through something in your life, know that God is saying to you, I am bigger than your sin. I am more loving than you could possibly imagine. I'm more peaceful than you've ever experienced. I'm more forgiving than you ever felt. And in the midst of the time when you think that you are the furthest away from me, I'm literally waiting for you to just turn around and come back to me. Okay? So that's all I've got for tonight. Thanks for coming.